Fireside Tales. Hello, I'm Merlin, Mililli. Welcome to my fireside, where I tell weird tales within tales. And I drink coffee from my skull mug, skull cup. My kids broke my skull mug. I drink from my skull mug because I'm a deadhead. A deadhead is a person who really likes the Grateful Dead, and I happen to be one of those people. And the Grateful Dead is a psychedelic rock band from San Francisco who recently wrapped their last phase up with the passing of Bob Weir. Oh, we're gonna miss you, Bobby. So, here at Fireside Tales, we discuss the Grateful Dead. I tell the story of the Grateful Dead every week because it's about reincarnation. And every week here at Fireside Tales, we discuss reincarnation. One of the reasons why I make this show is because I don't think people really understand reincarnation. And so it's just made in the hopes that people will understand reincarnation better after watching my show. So I have been discussing the Akashic Records, or the Akasha. Every week I discuss the Akashic Records, or the Akasha. It's a meditative library where every soul excuse me, has a book, and it's an ancient meditative library. You can only reach it through meditation, or just in a spiritual sense. I suppose if you're dead, you could probably reach it without any issues. But it's a metaphysical place on the metaphysical plane. Squeaky, be quiet. So in each soul's book is a record of who and where and when that soul has been. So each week I discuss my book in the Akashic Records. I suppose I could go to other people's books, but I don't feel like it's any of my business. And so I only go to my book. And my book is big and old and dusty. And it's got a watermark. There's like half of the book is light and dry and sandy, and for some reason my lives in that part of the book are longer than my lives in the other part of the book, which is dark and wet and muddy and has shorter lives. I think the watermark marks the Great Flood. And it's been documented in many a book, including the Bible, the Great Flood. So I don't see why it wouldn't mark the Great Flood. It also seems to mark when we started to record time. And the dark, wet, muddy part is when we started to really record things. And so, like, BC is the light, dry, sandy part, and AD is the dark, wet, muddy part. So, every week I've been discussing my book in the Akashic Records. And in my book, in the Akashic Records, I have threads that connect each life to the other. One of these threads is fire and fire safety. So it's important to have a safe fire. I have water up there in the kettle, and I have water here in my cup. I also have water around the corner in a sprayer on my sink. And if you have an outdoor fire, you want to have, obviously, water nearby, but you also want to dig down and line a pit with rocks, and then line that with rocks. Make sure there's nothing growing out of it. Make sure you make your pit in a place where there's no overhanging branches that can catch fire. And then you, besides water, with an outdoor fire, you want a bucket of sand or just loose earth and a shovel. And if you obviously leave the fire, you don't want to ever leave it unattended. So you want to either leave a person with it or put it out. So fire and fire safety have always been extremely important to me and my soul. But also meditation, which is how I get to my book in the first place, and something I've been doing every life that I've existed. So I also, before I meditate, I like to smudge and ground. This is a dried sage. They call it a smudge stick. And it cleanses one's aura. Again, you want to be careful not to catch anything afire or yourself, but you smudge your aura with this smudge stick. Smudge bear. I don't know if you can see him, but he's here. So that's smudging. I'm going to go ahead and put that out. And then grounding is a breathing exercise which cleanses your inside. So you want to breathe out all your negative energy. And then you want to breathe in positive energy. I think an uber positive thought. Until you breathe out positivity. And that way you get the most positive results from your meditation. I like to do it before ritual or reading. I read tarot and runes. So I also like to do smudging and grounding before astral projection. And I warn that you shouldn't astral project without your spirit guides. You should always take them with you. So obviously reincarnation is a thread. I mean, that's kind of an obvious thread. But also being a psychic medium is a thread. And I communicate with the spirit realm a lot. And all the spirits seem to think that if you're reincarnated, you've done so because you've been murdered. And everybody that gets murdered gets to come back and try again. And apparently that's how it works. I have not been able to disprove this, and the more time marches on, the more it makes sense. So I've had a lot of people be like, well, there's not enough people, and then if everybody's born again, and blah, 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 blah. But that's how they sort it out. It's if you're murdered, you get to come back and try again. And I think it's obvious that I've been murdered quite a bit. So here I am again. And stones and stars are also a couple more threads of mine. So in our first season, I discussed each life just a little bit. And then I went back to the very beginning of the book and I started moving forward life by life. And each season has just covered one life since the first season. So this season, we are in ancient Iran, ancient Persia, ancient Iran to ancient Egypt. And that's what they called Persia. Excuse me. As far as I can tell, I'm pretty sure so far this season we have been discussing the last life in my light, dry, sandy part of my book. So I think this is my last life in BC, but it might not be. It's near to my last life in BC. And so this is starting in 550 BC and stretching to 486 BC. And I believe, according to my book, I was Darius the First, or Darius the Great, the Persian king. His name is changed into Greek, so originally it was Daria Baruch. I was looking for that last episode, and I hadn't written it down. So that's why I didn't find it. I also disappeared for a while trying to read my dummy card. So I apologize for that. A little rusty first episode of the new season. So had a long while off and a lot of stuff happened. So here we are, new season and starting anew again. So today, I'm going to talk about what we know. That is like historians, what's written down. And what we know comes from Darius's carvings into stone or his clay tablets. And also the writings of Herodotus still survive. That was Bear moving my dummy card in entirely out of my reach. So, we know some things, like I said, from the carvings. And notice carvings are all in stone. Well, some of them are engraved into clay tablets, but could you not? So anyway, we know from what both Darius and Herodotus tell us that boys at the time were taught to ride a horse, shoot a bow, and to speak the truth. Darius was son of the satrap of Bactria, so he would have been taught military strategy and how to lead men. The Behistun inscription, which is also carved into stone, but carved right into a mountain. And it's weird, it's almost as if it wasn't meant for any human to read, but for the gods to look upon. Because it's way up on a mountain and not really where anybody on the ground could see it without some sort of binoculars or something. So, according to the Behistun inscription, there was this crisis of 522, and Herodotus talks about it, and so does Darius. And the crisis of 522 was when the Persian king Cambyses II received word that his brother Bardia had usurped his throne while he was away in Egypt. And Cambyses knew this couldn't be true because he had already sent soldiers, assassins, to kill his brother, who would have been his heir, but so knowing that this usurper was not really his brother, he made to march, Cambyses did, from Egypt back to Persia, and he did not make it. He died on the way. So Darius, believing that he was also of royal blood, decided to take the throne. Some people think that he usurped the throne. I believe he was taught all those things about military strategy and how to lead men because he was royalty, and that this timeline is true. Apparently there was Achaemenes, which the dynasty is named after, so that person obviously existed. Some people question whether or not Darius made up Achaemenes, which doesn't make sense because it's the name of the dynasty. So obviously that person existed. And then there's Thespis below Achaemenes. Thespis would have been Achaemenes' son. Then Cyrus the First, who beget Cambyses the First, who beget Cyrus the Second, who beget Cambyses the Second and Bardia. But then Thespis had another son, Ariaramnes. Sorry, all these Greek names are odd for me because these were not the real names. They changed everything into Greek when the Greeks took over. So, Ariaramnes, then Ariaramnes had a son, Arsames, and Arsames had a son, Histapes, and Histapes had a son, and that was Darius the First. And Darius the First would go on to marry Cyrus's daughter, Athos, and the two would have a son, Xerxes, who would be Darius's heir. So people say that Darius made it up and stuff. I don't think he made anything up. He always did everything in the name of Ahura Mazda, which was his god, and he always even called in the stuff carved into stone, called for Ahura Mazda to strike him down if he was lying. I don't think he would have said that if he was lying. And Ahura Mazda, interestingly, is also the Zoroastrian god. And they're a god of fire, so it's like a nature god. And I've always worshipped, another of my threads is I've always worshipped nature and some sort of nature god. Goddess. These days I just jump to worshipping the earth, and she's my goddess. Would you please stop moving that? For some reason my dog really just wants to rub up against my dummy card and knock my whole system down. That's just gonna really mess up my day, bear. So Darius, we also know from all of these records that he put down rebellions in Elam and Babylonia, and then later would put down rebellions from Persia and Elam and Media and Assyria and Egypt and Partha and Margiana and Sadigita and Scythia. That's a lot of rebellions. He ruled for 36 years, I believe. And Bear, come here. Leave the dummy card alone. And he changed and shaped the government, which hadn't been very effective prior to Darius. He organized the government into 27 satrapies. And they were led by a satrap, usually royal family or a noble. Last season I discussed the royal road, or last episode, excuse me, I discussed the royal road, which ran from Susa, modern southwestern Iran, 1,500 miles-ish to Sardis in what is now western Turkey. That's a lot of land covered. I mean, he ruled over Upper and Lower Egypt and all of Gaza, and all the way out to Iran. So it's pretty amazing to me to think nowadays, like, there's so many different countries there. He just made it all Persia. But each of my lives do connect to the next. Like, last season we discussed the life in my book prior to this, which was in ancient Egypt, and I believe I had been Hatshepsut, and Hatshepsut was a pharaoh, a female pharaoh, one of the only female pharaohs, and she ruled over Upper and Lower Egypt, though she was pharaoh. So, like, king of Persia is a kind of a step down. So she was well trained and knew how to lead as well. So Darius came into this life knowing how to lead people. That was still fresh. So I also discussed last week that Darius dug the Suez Canal. The Old Persian script was developed by Darius, and before him, Persians didn't have their own language. He built fortresses and palaces and renovated old, broken down buildings. And he built Persepolis, or Persa, the city of the Persians. And it became the capital of Persia. He built a hippo-style Apadana, a great hall at Persepolis, which was so big it could hold as many as 10,000 people. And here he received dignitaries and honored guests. So, not much remains of any of his palaces these days, and we'll talk about that in upcoming episodes as we barrel through this season. But I believe the Greeks destroyed his that specific palace at Persepolis. And it's kind of obvious from the changes in everybody's names. And everything became Greek. So it's odd. He did go, right before he died, over to Greece. He tried to take Athens, and that didn't work out, and the Persians ended up retreating, and so his last campaign failed, and he should have never gone there. That was stupid. And the Greeks obviously ended up kicking his ass, or someone's ass, probably his heir, but He died in 486, so they say. Though the King's List is carved into stone, and it's more than one language. I think it's 3 different languages, and it marks Darius as living for like 1,000 years. So that jives with my book. Hatshepsut apparently lived for like 1,000 years too, but everyone's like, oh, it just must be a weird way of calculating the years, and I don't know. Maybe it's in months, and it's not. It's just that I think people lived a lot longer lives before the Great Flood, and then after the Great Flood, they lived shorter lives. I just think that makes total sense to me, and it's how my book runs, and it's how the King's List seems to work as well. So there's evidence that backs me up. The Apadana had 72 columns, each 24 meters in height. So that's, for the time, for BC, to have a hall that big that could hold 10,000 people, even by standards today, that would be like an amazing feat of great engineering and style, and blows my mind that was just something he did. But anywho, so next week we'll discuss more of what I know personally, and like I said, what I know differs a little bit from what historians say we know. We think we are so smart, and we are just not all that smart. I also noticed last week you guys couldn't see my fire at all. I'm trying to bring it into the shot here. Hopefully you can see it. So every week I also sing the only song I really know about reincarnation. And, I never told the story of the Grateful Dead. Oh my goodness, let me tell it really quick. Once, long, long ago, there was a traveler. It was so long ago that she traveled by foot. And one day, while traveling along, she happened upon a village. She got closer and noticed that the people were all gathered around in the village. She got closer still and noticed that they were arguing. She got closer still and noticed they were arguing quite literally over a dead body. They were arguing over who was going to pay the dead man's debts, and who was going to bury him, and who was going to pay for that. And the traveler thought this was all just really disrespectful and kind of disgusting. So she just walked right up and stopped them and said, I will pay the dead man's debts. I will pay for a proper burial. And so she did. And then she stopped and prayed over the dead man's body, over his proper grave. And then she traveled on. Then decades later, the same traveler from the beginning of the story happens upon a life or death situation in which out of nowhere comes this person that just saves her life. And she says, thank you. Where did you come from? Who are you? Why did you save my life? And the stranger says simply, I am the Grateful Dead. Sorry about that. I usually tell that story first. But I got involved talking about my threads and then jumped right into Darius. So sorry about that. Confusion, befuddled, jumbled mess that is my show, Fireside Tales. So, like I said, the only song that I know about reincarnation, except for a song that I wrote called Reincarnation, is Deja Vu by David Crosby. And I've been singing that every week. Then I wrote a song called Reincarnation, and David Crosby died, like, after I sang it once, I think. And so since David Crosby died, I've just been singing Deja Vu because it's just my way of honoring David. So here we go. If I had ever been here before, I would probably know just what to do. Don't you? If I had ever been here before, on another time around the wheel, I would probably know just how to deal with all of you. And I feel like I've been here before. Feel like I've been here before. And you know, it makes me wonder what going on? Under the ground. Do you know? Don't you wonder? What's going on down under you? La da da, la da da, la da da da, la da da da, la da. We have all been here before. 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 Oh, sorry about the fumble of the harmonica. We do this live. I don't like to edit, so it probably will stay in. So that's it for me today. I bet you if I left this whole apparatus up, none of my animals would touch it the rest of the day. Oh, gotta love your animals. But, oh, they do try my patience, as do my children. So, yeah, next week we're going to discuss more what I know. This week we discussed what history says is true. So, join me next week, where I give you a little more insight into what's really going on. Thanks for watching. See you next week. A Mililli Studios production.